The last copper coin felt impossibly heavy in Henrik Nolan's calloused palm as he stood outside the trading post, watching the orc woman rummage through the refuse pile behind the building with movements that spoke of exhaustion rather than hope. Henrik had been a mountain man for 7 years now, ever since the war ended and left him with nothing but nightmares and a desperate need for solitude. He knew hunger intimately, had felt it gnaw at his belly during those first brutal winters when he barely knew how to trap or hunt. The coin in his hand was supposed to buy him salt, maybe a small sack of flour if the trader felt generous. It was all he had left after a disastrous spring when an early thaw had destroyed his pelts before he could get them to market. The orc woman looked up suddenly, her amber eyes meeting his for just a moment before she turned away, shame coloring her green cheeks a darker shade. She was young, maybe 20 summers at most, with the small tusks and pointed ears typical of her kind. But where orc warriors were known for their bulk and muscle, she looked gaunt, her leather vest hanging loose on a frame that should have been powerful but instead spoke of weeks without proper food. Henrik found his feet carrying him into the trading post before his mind fully caught up with his decision. "What can I get for this?" he asked Marcus, the grizzled trader who ran the outpost. Marcus squinted at the coin. "Not much, maybe some hardtack and a bit of dried meat." "Why?" "Give me whatever food it will buy." "Real food?" Marcus raised an eyebrow but shrugged, gathering up some bread that was only a day old, a small wrapped package of salted pork, and a handful of withered apples from his winter stores. "You going soft, Nolan?" Henrik didn't answer, just took the bundle and walked back outside. The orc woman had given up on the refuse pile and was sitting against the back wall of the building, her head tilted back and eyes closed. Up close, Henrik could see the hollows in her cheeks, the way her breathing came shallow and quick. "Here," he said, his voice rougher than he intended, her eyes snapped open, immediately wary. "What? Food? Take it." She stared at the bundle like it might bite her. "Why?" "Because you need it more than I do. I have nothing to trade." Henrik set the bundle down beside her and stepped back, giving her space. "I am not asking for trade." She looked at him for a long moment, those amber eyes searching his face for mockery or cruelty or some hidden motive. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she reached out with trembling fingers and unwrapped the cloth. The sound she made when she saw the bread was almost a sob. Henrik turned to leave to give her privacy, but her voice stopped him. "Wait." He glanced back. She had torn off a piece of bread and was chewing slowly, as if trying to make each bite last forever. "What is your name?" she asked. "Henrik Nolan." "I am Zara." She swallowed, then met his eyes again. "You gave me your last coin." It was not a question. Henrik wondered how she knew. "I have been hungry before," he said simply. "I know what it looks like." Zara nodded slowly, then said something that would echo in his mind for days to come. "You will never go hungry again, Henrik Nolan. I swear it on my blood and bones." The words had the weight of ritual to them, of an oath spoken in deadly earnest. Henrik wanted to tell her she owed him nothing, that a single meal did not require a life debt, but something in her expression made him hold his tongue. "Get somewhere warm," he said instead. "There is a storm coming in from the north." He left her there and began the long walk back to his cabin in the high mountains, trying not to think about the empty stores waiting for him, or how he would survive until the summer hunting season. He had made his choice, and he would live with it, the same way he had lived with every other hard decision in his life. The storm hit 2 days later, a howling beast of wind and snow that turned the world white and deadly. Henrik huddled in his cabin with his last bits of dried venison and melted snow for water, trying to make his meager supplies last. On the 3rd day, when the storm finally broke, He forced himself outside to check his trap lines even though he knew the chances of finding anything were slim. The snow was hip-deep in places, and the cold bit through his worn coat like wolves' teeth. Henrik checked the first 3 traps and found them empty, their triggers frozen solid. At the 4th trap, he found tracks, large and fresh, and his hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt. Orc tracks. His mind immediately went to Zara, and he felt a strange twist of concern in his chest. Surely she had not followed him up the mountain in this weather. That would be madness. He followed the tracks anyway, something between curiosity and worry driving him forward. They led not toward his cabin, but to a sheltered overhang about a quarter-mile east, a place Henrik himself had used for shelter once or twice during particularly bad storms. Zara was there, and she was not alone. She had built a small fire that was mostly coals now, and beside her lay the dressed carcasses of 2 mountain goats, already frozen solid in the bitter cold. When she saw him, she stood, brushing snow from her leather breeches. "Henrik Nolan," she said, and there was something fierce and satisfied in her voice. "I told you, you will never go hungry again." Henrik stared at the goats, then at her. "You hunted these. In the storm. The storm is when they shelter in places you can find them. I am orc. This cold is nothing compared to the northern wastes where my people come from." She picked up one of the carcasses as easily as if it weighed nothing. "Show me where you live. I will bring these." "You do not have to do this," Henrik said, but even as the words left his mouth, his stomach cramped with hunger, and he knew his pride was a luxury he could not afford. "I swore an oath," Zara said simply. "Will you deny me my honor?" So Henrik led her back to his cabin, and together they hauled the goats inside. The cabin was small, just one room with a stone fireplace, a rough bed in one corner, and a table with 2 chairs. It was not much, but it was weathertight and the chimney drew well. Zara looked around with interest while Henrik got the fire built up properly. "You live alone?" "Yes." "Why?" It was a direct question, typical of orcs from what little Henrik knew of them. They did not dance around subjects the way humans did. "The war left me wanting solitude," he said, which was both true and incomplete. Zara nodded as if she understood. "War leaves wounds that do not bleed." They worked in comfortable silence, Henrik boiling water for tea while Zara expertly butchered one of the goats, setting aside the best cuts and preparing the organ meats with practiced efficiency. By the time true darkness fell, they had goat meat roasting over the fire and the promise of full bellies for the first time in too long. "Where is your clan?" Henrik asked as they ate, the rich fatty meat almost overwhelming after so many lean days. Zara's expression shuddered. "I have no clan." "Exiled." Something like that. She tore off another piece of meat with her small tusks, chewing thoroughly before continuing. "I spoke against our war chief, said that raiding human settlements would only bring more soldiers, more death. He said I was weak, corrupted by human thinking. When I refused to participate in a raid on a farming village, he cast me out." Henrik absorbed this, understanding dawning. "How long ago?" 3 months. "I thought I could make it on my own, but I did not know these southern lands. The game is different here, and humans see my face and reach for weapons." She looked at him across the fire. "You are the first who has shown me kindness since I left my people. The first to feed you, maybe, but you repaid that tenfold already." Zara shook her head firmly. "I said you would never go hungry again. One goat does not fulfill that oath. If you permit it, I would stay. Hunt for us both, at least through the winter." Henrik wanted to say no, wanted to protect the solitude he had worked so hard to achieve. But he found himself thinking of those amber eyes in the trading post, of the desperate dignity with which she had searched through garbage. And he thought of the long, cold nights ahead, and how much easier they would be with someone to share the burden of survival. "The cabin is small," he said finally, "but you are welcome to stay." Something in Zara's expression softened just a fraction. "Thank you, Henrik Nolan. Just Henrik is fine. Then you may call me just Zara." The corner of Henrik's mouth twitched, almost a smile. It had been a long time since he had smiled. They settled into an unexpected routine over the following weeks. Zara proved to be an exceptional hunter, her orc strength and stamina allowing her to range far into the mountains in search of game. Henrik, in turn, knew the land intimately and could guide her to the best hunting grounds, the places where elk gathered or where mountain cats made their dens. At first, they spoke little beyond the practical necessities of survival. But as the days passed and trust built slowly between them, conversations began to extend beyond the immediate. Henrik learned that Zara had been training to be a clan storyteller before her exile, that she could recite the lineage of orc chiefs going back 12 generations, and that she missed her younger brother with an ache she tried to hide. Zara learned that Henrik had been a soldier in the border wars, that he had seen things that still woke him gasping in the night, and that he had once been engaged to a woman named Catherine, who had married his best friend when Henrik came back changed by what he had experienced. "You hate them?" Zara asked one evening as they sat by the fire, mending clothes and tools. "No," Henrik said, and was surprised to find it true. "They were right for each other. I was not who Catherine thought I was anymore. Maybe I never was." Zara was quiet for a moment, her needle moving steadily through the tear in Henrik's spare shirt. "My brother asked me not to go, said that exile was a kind of death, that I should apologize to the war chief and bend my neck in submission. But I could not. Those farmers he wanted to raid had done nothing to us. They were just trying to survive like everyone else. That took courage, or foolishness. Some days I am not sure which." She tied off the thread and bit it clean with her tusks, then held up the shirt to inspect her work. "Your people and mine have been enemies for so long. Sometimes I wonder if it is even possible to change that." Henrik took the shirt, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Maybe it starts small. One meal shared, one winter survived together." Their eyes met across the fire, and something passed between them, fragile and tentative but real. Winter deepened, and the world outside became a hostile place of brutal cold and bitter winds. But inside the cabin, warmth grew in more ways than one. Henrik found himself watching Zara more often, noticing the way firelight caught in her dark hair, the grace in her movements despite her size and strength. He noticed the way she laughed, a deep, rich sound that seemed to fill the small space, and how her tusks were actually quite elegant when she smiled. For her part, Zara discovered that Henrik was more than the silent, haunted man she had first met. He had a dry wit that caught her off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it. He was patient when teaching her to read human script, never mocking when she struggled with the letters. And his hands, scarred and calloused as they were, could be surprisingly gentle. The first time Henrik reached out to brush snow from Zara's hair after she came in from hunting, they both froze, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of how the casual touch had sent something electric between them. Zara stepped back quickly, mumbling something about needing to dress the rabbits she had caught, and Henrik turned away, his heart beating harder than it should. After that, the air in the cabin felt different, charged with an awareness neither of them wanted to acknowledge. They were more careful about touching, about meeting each other's eyes for too long. And yet, Henrik found himself lying awake at night, listening to Zara's breathing from her bedroll by the fire, wondering what it would be like to reach across that distance. He told himself it was impossible, that humans and orcs were not meant to be together, that the world would see any such union as perverse or disgusting. But his heart, stubborn and unreasonable, refused to listen. Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow receding in grudging inches. Henrik and Zara ventured farther from the cabin, checking trap lines and hunting the game that emerged from winter dens. They worked well together, communicating with gestures and glances as much as words, their movements synchronized from months of shared effort. It was on one of these spring hunts that everything changed. They were tracking an elk through a narrow canyon when Zara suddenly grabbed Henrik and pulled him against the rock wall, her hand over his mouth. He froze, trusting her instinct, and a moment later heard what she had already detected. Voices, harsh and angry. Carefully they crept forward until they could see into a small clearing. A group of orc warriors, 5 of them, had surrounded a human trapper. The man was elderly, his face gray with terror as one of the orcs held an axe to his throat. "Please," the trapper was saying, "I have done nothing to your people. I am just passing through." "Your kind killed my sister," the orc with the axe snarled. "Your soldiers burned our village." One human life is nothing compared to that debt. Henrik felt Zara tense beside him, saw her face set with grim determination. Before he could stop her, she stepped into the clearing. "Stop," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. The orc warriors spun, weapons raised, then faltered when they saw her. "Zara," one of them said, a female with intricate braids, "you live, I live, Cora, and I will not stand by while you murder an innocent." The orc with the axe laughed bitterly. "You speak of innocence. There is no such thing among humans. They are all guilty. The same way all orcs are guilty in their eyes." Zara moved forward, placing herself between the warriors and the trembling trapper. "This is why our people die, Grath. Because we cannot see past our hatred long enough to recognize that vengeance only breeds more vengeance." "You were always weak," Grath spat. "This is why the war chief cast you out." "The war chief cast me out because I would not slaughter farmers and children." "If that is weakness, then I embrace it." Henrik had been slowly circling around, and now he stepped into the clearing as well, his bow drawn and arrow nocked. 5 against 2 were bad odds, but he would not leave Zara to face this alone. The orc warriors tensed, clearly not having realized a human was present. Grath's eyes narrowed. "So it is true. You have been living with a human, sharing his bed, no doubt." "Mind your tongue," Henrik said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Or what human? You will kill us all." Grath laughed again. "You cannot even draw that bow properly. I can see the tremor in your hands." It was true. Henrik's hands were shaking, the old battle trauma rising up despite his efforts to suppress it, but he kept the arrow aimed at Grath's chest anyway. "Let the man go," Zara said. "He has done nothing to you. Your quarrel is with human soldiers, not trappers." "All humans are enemies," Grath said. "Then what does that make me?" Zara asked softly. "I have lived with a human all winter. He saved my life when I was starving. He has shown me more honor and kindness than any orc, including those who once called themselves my brothers and sisters." The warriors shifted uncomfortably. Cora, the female, lowered her spear slightly. "Zara, please, come back with us. The new war chief might forgive your exile if you renounce your human sympathies." "I have no sympathies to renounce. I have learned what I should have known all along, that kindness and cruelty exist in all peoples, and that judging an entire race by the actions of their worst members is the path to endless suffering." "Prettily spoken," Grath sneered, "but words do not change reality. This human dies, and so does your pet if he interferes." The moment hung suspended, violence coiled and ready to spring. Then the old trapper, who had been silent throughout the exchange, spoke up in a quavering voice. "I knew an orc once," he said. "During the war. He was a prisoner, wounded, and I was assigned to guard him. We talked those long nights. He told me about his son, about the farm he wanted to build when the war ended. When they came to execute him, I tried to stop them. I failed, but I have never forgotten that he was more than just the enemy. He was a father who wanted to grow wheat and raise his boy in peace." The clearing was silent. Then Cora said, "What was his name, this orc?" "Thorgak. Thorgak of the Red Mountain clan." Cora's spear point dropped to the ground. "My uncle. They told us he died bravely in battle. He died on his knees with a sword through his heart, begging them to tell his family he loved them." The old trapper's eyes were wet. "I have carried his last words for 20 years, but I never knew how to find his clan, never knew if speaking them would bring more violence. But he said to tell his son Cora that she should grow strong and wise, and that the world needed wisdom more than it needed warriors. Cora was my name before I became a warrior," the female orc said quietly. "He named me for the mountain flowers that bloom in spring." She looked at Grath, then back at Zara. "Perhaps there has been enough death," Grath snarled. "You are all weak, corrupted by human lies." "No," Zara said. "We are tired. Tired of fighting, tired of dying, tired of endless hatred that solves nothing." She looked at each of the warriors in turn. "Go back to the clan. Tell them that peace is possible if we are brave enough to reach for it. Tell them that Zara of the Broken Tusk clan is alive and well, living proof that humans and orcs can coexist." "They will not listen," Cora said, but there was doubt in her voice now. "Maybe not today." But seeds take time to grow. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cora turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. One by one, the other warriors followed until only Grath remained. "This is not over," he said, glaring at Zara and Henrik. "It is for today," Henrik replied, finally lowering his bow. "And tomorrow we can decide to make the same choice, and the day after that." Grath spat on the ground, then vanished into the forest. The old trapper sagged against a tree, breathing hard. "Thank you, both of you. I thought I was dead." "Can you make it back to the trading post?" Henrik asked. "Yes. Yes, I know the way." The old man looked at Zara. "Your uncle would be proud of you. He dreamed of a day when our peoples could live without fear of each other." Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After the trapper had gone, she turned to Henrik. "You did not have to stand with me. Those were my people. Your people would say you should have let them kill the trapper, maybe killed me as well." Henrik moved closer, drawn by something he could no longer deny. "You are not my people or your people anymore. You are just Zara. And I would stand with you against the whole world if I had to." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither could ignore. Zara's amber eyes searched his face, wide and vulnerable in a way he had never seen. "Henrik," she said, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer and a question all at once. He reached up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his palm. Her skin was warm, the green shade deeper where she flushed. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "Tell me this is madness and that we cannot cross this line." "It is madness," Zara whispered, "but I do not care any more." When their lips met, it was tentative at first, uncertain. But then Zara made a soft sound and pressed closer, and Henrik wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tight against him. She was tall and strong and perfect, and kissing her felt like finally coming home after years of wandering. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard, and stared at each other with wonder and dawning joy. "This will not be easy," Zara said. "Both our peoples will condemn us, I know. We will be outcasts. You will lose any chance of returning to human society." "I already was an outcast." I chose these mountains because I could not stand to be around people who looked at me and saw a broken thing. Henrik brushed his thumb across her cheekbone. But when you look at me, you just see me. No judgment, no pity, just acceptance. You gave me food when I was starving, shelter when I had none, friendship when I had been cast out and abandoned. Zara's voice roughened with emotion. You gave me hope, Henrik Nolan. How could I not love you? The words hit Henrik like a physical blow, stealing his breath. You love me. Is that so surprising? You are kind and brave, and you make terrible jokes that somehow make me laugh anyway. You see past what I am to who I am. How could I not love you? Henrik felt something crack open in his chest, some wall he had built around his heart during the war and never quite dismantled. I love you too, he said, and the words came easier than he expected. I think I have loved you since that day at the trading post, watching you refuse to beg even though you were dying of hunger. They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The walk back to the cabin felt different now, charged with promise and possibility. They held hands, fingers intertwined, and talked about the future with a freedom they had not allowed themselves before. We should build a bigger cabin, Zara said. This one is too small if we are going to truly share it. Agreed. And a proper storehouse, maybe a smokehouse for preserving meat. Gardens. I am terrible at growing things, but you could teach me. Henrik grinned. You can hunt and I will grow vegetables. Between us, we will eat like royalty. Royalty who are despised by both their peoples, Zara said, but she was smiling. Let them despise us. We will be together, and that is worth more than their approval. They spent the rest of the spring preparing for their new life together. Henrik taught Zara how to coax plants from the rocky soil, how to identify which wild herbs were useful and which were poison. Zara taught Henrik tracking techniques passed down through generations of orc hunters, how to read the forest the way she did. They expanded the cabin, adding a second room and reinforcing the walls. It was hard work, but they labored side by side, and the cabin began to feel like a real home rather than just a shelter. On the day they finished the expansion, Henrik carved their initials into the doorframe, HN and Z. A declaration to the world, or at least to themselves, that this was their place, their home together. That night, they made love for the first time, a slow and tender exploration that left them both breathless and awed. Afterward, lying tangled together in their new bed, Zara traced patterns on Henrik's chest. Are you happy? She asked softly. Yes. Are you? Happier than I ever thought I could be. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. I thought being exiled was the end of my life. But it was actually the beginning of finding you. Henrik pulled her down for a kiss, slow and deep. I was just existing before you came, surviving but not really living. You changed that. Summer arrived in a riot of wildflowers and warm sunshine. Henrik and Zara settled into their life together with the ease of people who fit together naturally. They hunted and gathered, tended their gardens and made improvements to their homestead. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories and dreams. They made love under the stars and woke tangled together each morning. It was, quite simply, perfect, but perfection never lasts forever. The trouble arrived on a warm July evening in the form of armed men. 6 of them, humans, wearing the dark green uniforms of the territorial militia. Henrik was in the garden when they rode up, and his blood ran cold. Henrik Nolan, their leader asked, a hard-faced man with sergeant's stripes on his shoulder. I am he. We have received reports that you are harboring an orc, that you are living with one of the enemy in defiance of territorial law. Henrik stood slowly, very aware of Zara inside the cabin. What law says a man cannot choose his own companions? the law that states all orcs are to be driven from human lands or killed on sight. The war may be over, but the threat remains. The sergeant's hand rested on his sword hilt. Where is the orc, Nolan? There is no threat here, just two people trying to live in peace. Peace with an orc is an illusion. They are savages, incapable of civilized behavior. Now stand aside. We will search the cabin. You will not. The sergeant's eyes hardened. You are interfering with militia business. That is a crime. This is my land. You have no authority here. We have the authority of steel and the mandate of protecting human settlements from orc aggression. The sergeant drew his sword. Stand aside or be cut down. Henrik's heart hammered in his chest and his hands began to shake. The old familiar terror was rising, the memories of battle and blood and dying men. But he forced himself to stand firm, even as his vision started to tunnel. Then Zara emerged from the cabin, her bow in hand and an arrow nocked. You will leave this place. Now. The soldiers tensed, hands going to weapons. You see, the sergeant said. Already she threatens violence. You came to my home with drawn steel, Zara said calmly. I am merely responding to the threat you present. Now leave before someone is hurt. We outnumber you 6-2, the sergeant said. And your pet human is clearly too broken to fight. Look at him shaking like a leaf. Henrik hated that the man was right, hated the way trauma still controlled his body even when his mind knew what he needed to do. But Zara stepped forward, placing herself between Henrik and the soldiers. He has seen enough violence. He came to these mountains for peace, and I will not let you disturb it. Leave. This is your only warning. Brave words from a savage. The sergeant gestured to his men. Take them both. If the orc resists, kill her. The soldiers moved forward and Zara loosed her arrow. It took the sergeant in the shoulder, spinning him around. Before the other men could react, she had another arrow nocked. The next one goes through someone's eye, she said, her voice deadly calm. I am orc. I do not miss. The soldiers hesitated, looking to their sergeant, who was cursing and clutching his wounded shoulder. Henrik forced himself to move, to step up beside Zara, despite the trembling in his limbs. This is my home, he said, willing his voice to steadiness. Zara is my partner in all things. She has done nothing to threaten human settlements. She has lived peacefully here with me for months. If that is a crime, then arrest us both. But know that we will resist, and blood will be spilled on both sides. You would choose an orc over your own people. One of the soldiers asked, disbelief clear in his voice. I choose the woman I love over blind hatred and prejudice, Henrik said. If that makes me a traitor, so be it. The soldiers looked uncertain now, their conviction wavering in the face of Henrik and Zara's united front. The sergeant, still bleeding, snarled something Henrik did not catch and gestured for his men to fall back. This is not over, he said, echoing Grath's words from months before. We will return with more men. You cannot stand against the whole territory. Maybe not, Henrik said. But we will try. The soldiers mounted and rode away, leaving Henrik and Zara standing in front of their cabin. As soon as they were out of sight, Henrik's legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees, shaking uncontrollably. Zara dropped beside him immediately, pulling him against her. I have you, she murmured. You are safe. It is over. I am sorry, Henrik gasped out. I am so sorry. I wanted to fight, but I could not. I just froze like I always do. I am useless. I am broken. Stop. Zara tilted his face up to look at her. You are not useless and you are not broken. You stood with me even though you were terrified. That is not weakness, Henrik. That is courage. I put you in danger. They came because of me, because I am human and I should have known they would find out eventually. They came because people fear what they do not understand. But we faced them together and we survived. She kissed his forehead gently. Together, Henrik, always together. They held each other as Henrik's shaking gradually subsided. When he could finally stand, they went inside and barred the door. Neither spoke much that night, just held each other close and tried not to think about what the sergeant's threat meant, but reality could not be ignored forever. 3 days later, Cora appeared at their door, her face grave. "I had to warn you," she said without preamble. "The human militia is gathering forces. They plan to return in strength to make an example of you both. But worse, word has reached my clan about you and Henrik. The new war chief sees your union as a betrayal that cannot be tolerated. He is sending warriors." "So we have enemies on both sides now," Zara said quietly. "Yes. I am sorry, Zara. I tried to speak for you to tell them that what you have found here is worth protecting, but they would not listen. To them, you are a traitor and Henrik is the human who corrupted you." Henrik felt a familiar despair settling over him. "So what do we do? Run. Keep running until there is nowhere left to go." "There might be another option," Cora said slowly. "There are others like you, humans and orcs who have found common ground, who are tired of the endless cycle of violence. They are gathering in the deep wilderness, building a settlement where both peoples can live together in peace. It is dangerous and uncertain, but it exists. I could take you there." Henrik and Zara looked at each other. "Is that what you want?" Henrik asked. "To leave this place we have built together. I want to be with you," Zara said. "Where we are matters less than that we are together, but I do not want to run either. This is our home." "Home is not just a place," Cora said gently. "It is where you are safe and accepted." "That is not here, not anymore, not with both our peoples hunting you." The truth of her words hung heavy in the air. Henrik thought of the cabin they had expanded, the garden they had planted, the life they had begun to build. But he thought too of the love he shared with Zara, and he knew which mattered more. "When do we need to leave?" he asked. "Soon. The warriors will arrive within 3 days and the militia likely before that. We should leave at dawn." They spent that night gathering what they could carry, packing food and tools and warm clothes for the journey. Henrik carved a message into the table before they left. "We chose love over hatred. May others have the courage to do the same." At dawn, they set out with Cora leading the way. The journey was long and hard, taking them deep into the wilderness where few humans or orcs ventured. They traveled for 2 weeks, moving quickly and carefully, always watching for pursuit. The settlement, when they finally reached it, was smaller than Henrik had expected, but no less remarkable for that. Perhaps 30 people lived there, a mix of humans and orcs and even a few others, half-breeds. Henrik realized with a start, children born of mixed unions. They had built their homes along a hidden valley, well defended and self-sufficient. The leader of the settlement was a grizzled human woman named Ruth Eriksson and an orc male named Draka. They greeted Henrik and Zara with warmth and understanding. "You are welcome here," Ruth said. "We ask only that you contribute what you can and respect the bonds that hold us together." "We will," Zara promised. They were given a small cabin on the edge of the settlement and immediately set about making it their own. It was strange at first, living among others again after so long in isolation. But the acceptance they found there, the way no one looked twice at a human and orc holding hands or sharing a home, was balm to wounds Henrik had not fully realized he carried. As summer faded into autumn, Henrik and Zara built a new life in the settlement. Henrik taught the children to read and write, while Zara led hunting parties that kept the community fed. They made friends, real friends, and slowly began to believe that perhaps this fragile peace could last. On a crisp October evening, as they sat outside their cabin watching the sunset, Henrik turned to Zara and took her hand. "There is something I want to ask you," he said, his voice suddenly nervous. Zara raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Henrik pulled a small object from his pocket, a ring he had carved from a piece of mountain oak, polished smooth and inlaid with small stones from their original cabin stream. I know we are already together in every way that matters, but I want to make it official in whatever way we can. Zara, will you marry me? Zara stared at the ring, then at Henrik, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears. Marriage, is that even legal for us? Legal. Maybe not by human or orc law, but Ruth is authorized to perform binding ceremonies here in the settlement. It would be real, Zara. Recognized by everyone here. A public declaration that we choose each other now and always. Yes, Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Henrik, I will marry you. I will marry you 100 times over if I could. Henrik slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a bright November day when the world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The entire settlement gathered to witness the ceremony. Humans and orcs standing side by side as Ruth spoke the words that would bind Henrik and Zara together. In this place, Ruth said, her voice carrying clearly in the crisp air, we do not recognize the old divisions that have torn our peoples apart. Here, we recognize only love, commitment, and the choice to build a life together despite all obstacles. Henrik Nolan, do you take Zara as your wife, to stand beside her in joy and sorrow, to protect and cherish her all your days? I do, Henrik said, his voice steady and sure. And Zara, do you take Henrik as your husband, to stand beside him in joy and sorrow, to protect and cherish him all your days? I do, Zara said, and her voice rang with conviction. Then by the power vested in me by this community of souls who have chosen peace over hatred and love over fear, I pronounce you married. You may kiss. Henrik pulled Zara close and kissed her deeply, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, with food and music and dancing that lasted long into the night. Henrik watched Zara laugh and dance with the settlement children, teaching them a traditional orc circle dance, and felt his heart swell with a happiness so intense it was almost painful. Later, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Zara traced the ring on her finger with a wondering touch. I never thought I would have this, she said softly. A home, a husband, a community that accepts me. When I was starving behind that trading post, I thought my life was over. And when I gave you that food, I thought I was just easing someone's hunger for a day, Henrik replied. I never imagined it would lead to all this. You kept your promise, Zara said, turning to face him. I told you that you would never go hungry again, and you have not. But you gave me something far greater than food. You gave me love and acceptance and a reason to hope. You gave me the same, Henrik said. I was just existing before you, haunted by the past and unable to imagine a future. But you saw something in me worth saving, worth loving. You gave me back my life. They kissed, slow and sweet, and Henrik marveled at how far they had both come from that desperate day outside the trading post. He had been down to his last coin, and she had been down to her last shred of pride. But somehow, in giving that coin away, he had found everything he had been missing. Winter settled over the valley, but it was not the harsh, lonely winter of the previous year. This time, Henrik and Zara faced the cold months surrounded by friends and community, secure in their home and their love for each other. They shared their story with the settlement children, teaching them that courage sometimes looked like spending your last coin on a stranger, and that love could bridge even the deepest divides. Spring came again, bringing with it new growth and new possibilities. Zara discovered she was pregnant in early April, and the news sent ripples of joy through the settlement. It would be the first child born of a human-orc union in the community, a symbol of hope for the future they were all building together. Henrik was terrified and elated in equal measure. A father. He was going to be a father. The thought filled him with an emotion so profound he could hardly name it. "Are you scared?" Zara asked him one evening as they sat by the fire, her hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. "Terrified," Henrik admitted. "What if I am not a good father? What if I pass on my brokenness to our child?" "You are not broken," Zara said firmly, as she had said so many times before. "You are healing. And you will teach our child what you have taught me, that kindness matters, that courage is not the absence of fear but acting despite it, and that love is worth fighting for." "What will our child be?" Henrik wondered. "Human or orc or something in between? Does it matter? They will be ours. They will be loved. That is what matters." Henrik nodded, pulling Zara close. "You are right. They will be loved beyond measure, and we will protect them and raise them to be better than both our peoples have been, to see past surface differences to the person beneath." As summer arrived and Zara's pregnancy progressed, Henrik found himself thinking often of that day at the trading post. If someone had told him then that spending his last copper coin would lead to all this, a wife he adored, a child on the way, a community of people who had chosen acceptance over hatred, he would never have believed them. But sometimes, the smallest act of kindness could change everything. Sometimes, choosing compassion over selfishness, even when it cost you dearly, could open doors you never knew existed. The baby arrived on a warm August evening, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced their presence to anyone within earshot. Henrik held his daughter for the first time and felt something shift fundamentally in his soul. She had Zara's green skin and his dark hair, small nubs where tusks might grow someday and human ears. She was perfect. "Hello, little one," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Welcome to the world." Zara, exhausted but glowing, reached out to touch the baby's cheek. "What should we name her?" Henrik thought for a moment. "Hope. Let us name her Hope, because that is what she represents. Hope for the future, hope that our peoples can learn to coexist, hope that love is stronger than hatred." "Hope Nolan," Zara said, testing the name. "Yes, it is perfect." As Henrik sat holding his daughter, with Zara resting beside him and the sounds of the settlement's celebration filtering through the window, he thought back one final time to that desperate, hungry day. He had given away his last coin without knowing what would come of it, had made a choice to ease someone else's suffering even at cost to himself. And in return, he had received everything he never knew he needed. The seasons turned, and Hope grew from infant to toddler, her laughter filling the cabin that Henrik and Zara had made into a home. She was curious and fearless, with her mother's strength and her father's gentle heart. She played equally with human and orc children, seeing no difference between them, and Henrik watched her with wonder, seeing the future he and Zara had hoped for beginning to take shape. More refugees arrived at the settlement over time, humans and orcs fleeing persecution and seeking the acceptance they could not find elsewhere. Each new arrival brought stories of violence and hatred, but also hope that things might change. The settlement grew and prospered, a living testament to what was possible when people chose understanding over fear. Henrik continued to struggle sometimes with his old traumas, the ghosts of the war that still haunted him. But Zara was always there, patient and loving, helping him through the dark moments. And gradually, as years passed, those moments became less frequent, the shadows less deep. Healing, he learned, was not a destination but a journey, and he was grateful to have Zara walking it with him. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the hillside overlooking the settlement, watching the sun set in a blaze of color. Hope, now 4 years old, was with friends, and they had this rare moment of peace together. "You ever regret it?" Henrik asked. "Giving up your old life, your clan, everything you knew?" Zara shook her head. "Not for a moment. My old life was ending when you found me. You gave me a new beginning, a better one. How could I regret that? I gave you food. You gave me so much more." "We gave each other everything that mattered," Zara corrected, taking his hand. "That is what love is, Henrik. Not keeping score, not measuring who gave more or who sacrificed more. Just choosing each other every day despite everything." Henrik pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "You said I would never go hungry again. You were right, but not in the way I expected. You fed my soul, Zara. You taught me how to live again. And you taught me that not all humans see orcs as monsters. That kindness exists, even in unexpected places. That love can bloom even in the harshest soil." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and built something beautiful from the ruins of their old lives. Behind them, the settlement lay peaceful and secure, a beacon of hope in a world still divided by hatred and fear. But here, in this hidden valley, a different truth prevailed. Here, a human and an orc could love each other openly, could raise a child together, could build a future free from the prejudices that plagued the wider world. It was not perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real and precious and worth every struggle it had taken to achieve. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Henrik thought one last time of that copper coin, his last bit of wealth given freely to a starving stranger. It had seemed like the end then, a final surrender to the hunger and hardship he could not escape. Instead, it had been a beginning. The beginning of love, of hope, of a future he had never dared to imagine. And though the world beyond the valley might never understand or accept what he and Zara had built together, that did not matter. They had each other, they had hope, and they had a community of people who had also chosen love over hatred. In the end, that was more than enough. It was everything. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their daughter. Hope proved to be as remarkable as her name suggested, growing into a bright and compassionate child who moved effortlessly between the human and orc communities within the settlement. She learned her father's language and her mother's, studied human writing and orc oral traditions, and became a bridge between the two cultures in ways that gave Henrik and Zara great pride. When Hope was 7, she asked them about the world beyond the valley, about why they lived here instead of out there. Henrik and Zara exchanged a glance, and then Zara knelt beside their daughter. "The world outside is not always kind to those who are different," she said gently. "Your father is human and I am orc, and many people think that means we should be enemies, not family." "That is stupid," Hope declared with all the certainty of a child who had never known prejudice. Henrik smiled despite the seriousness of the conversation. "Yes, it is, but it is also reality. Here in the valley we are safe, we are accepted. Out there things might be harder for you. Because I am both." Hope looked down at her green-tinged skin, touched the small tusks that had grown in over the past year. "Because I am not all human or all orc." "Because you are something new," Zara said. "Something that challenges the way people think the world should work, and change frightens people." Hope considered this seriously, her young face thoughtful. "But you and Papa made me anyway, even though you knew it would be hard." "We made you because we love each other," Henrik said. "And because we believed that love was more important than fear. You are not a mistake or a problem to be solved, Hope. You are a gift, proof that different peoples can come together and create something beautiful." Hope threw her arms around both her parents, squeezing tight. "I am glad you found each other. I am glad you gave her that coin, Papa." Henrik laughed, surprised. "How do you know about that?" "Everyone knows. It is like a story the grown-ups tell. How you spent your last money to feed a starving orc, and she promised you would never be hungry again, and then you fell in love and had me." Hope pulled back, grinning. "It is romantic." Zara and Henrik looked at each other and started laughing. "I suppose it is," Zara admitted. "Though at the time it just felt desperate and terrifying." "All the best love stories start that way," Ruth said, passing by with a basket of vegetables from her garden. She winked at Hope. "Your parents are heroes here, little one. They helped prove that our dream of peaceful coexistence was possible." As Ruth continued on her way, Hope looked up at her parents with shining eyes. "Can I tell that story to the other kids? About how you met, of course," Henrik said. "It is your story too, in a way. You are the continuation of that choice I made, the fulfillment of your mother's promise." Hope ran off to find her friends, eager to share the tale, and Henrik pulled Zara close. "We did well," Zara said softly. "Look at her. She has no hatred in her heart, no fear of people who look different from her. She is what we hoped the future could be." "One child is not enough to change the world," Henrik said, but he was smiling. "No, but she is a start, and there will be others. Already 3 more mixed couples in the settlement, and talk of more refugees coming. The dream is spreading, Henrik." It was true. Word of the settlement had spread through underground networks of sympathetic humans and progressive orc clans. More people arrived each season, some staying, some moving on but taking the message with them. Peace was possible if people had the courage to reach for it. The settlement expanded, building new homes and workshops, establishing trade with a few trusted human settlements and orc clans who were willing to deal with them. It was delicate work, fraught with danger and setback, but slowly, painfully, they were building bridges where none had existed before. Henrik found himself taking on a leadership role he had never sought, his story of loving an orc making him a symbol of what was possible. He spoke to visitors about how he had been a broken man, haunted by war, who had found healing through unexpected connection. Zara, too, became a leader, her dignity and wisdom earning respect even from those initially skeptical of orc capabilities. Together, they embodied the settlement's ideals. That love could cross any divide, that kindness mattered more than background, and that peace was worth fighting for. When Hope turned 10, the settlement celebrated with a great feast. It was tradition now to celebrate the children especially, seeing in them the future they were all working toward. Hope stood before the gathered community and recited the story of her parents' meeting, telling it with the dramatic flair of a born storyteller. "And then," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the gathering hall, "my papa gave his last coin to my mama, even though it meant he would go hungry, because he saw her suffering and could not look away. And my mama, who had been cast out by her people for refusing to hurt innocents, saw in him a kindness she had almost stopped believing existed. From that one act of compassion, everything we have here grew." The community burst into applause, and Henrik felt tears prick his eyes. How strange it was to hear their desperate, painful beginning transformed into a story of hope and inspiration. But perhaps that was the truth of it, after all. Perhaps every great love story began with pain and risk, and the courage to reach across divides. That night, alone in their cabin, Henrik and Zara held each other close. "You remember what you said to me?" Henrik asked. "That day at the trading post. I said you would never go hungry again. And I have not, but it is not just about food, is it? It never was." Zara smiled against his shoulder. "No, it was about belonging, connection, Having someone who sees you and values you, that is the deepest hunger and the hardest to satisfy. You satisfied it, Henrik said simply. You gave me a home, not just in this valley, but in your heart. That is worth more than all the coins in the world. And you gave me the same. You saw past my green skin and tusks to the person I was. You chose me when you had every reason not to. That gift of being seen, being chosen, it changed everything. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Henrik's dreams were peaceful, free from the nightmares that had once plagued him. More years passed, bringing change and growth. The settlement thrived, becoming a true community rather than just a collection of refugees. They established schools where human and orc children learned together, workshops where mixed teams created goods for trade, and a system of governance that gave equal voice to both peoples. It was not always easy. There were disputes and misunderstandings, moments when old prejudices flared up despite everyone's best efforts. But they worked through it, committed to the ideals that had brought them together. Henrik's hands grew more weathered. Zara's hair began to show threads of white at the temples. Hope grew from child to teenager, showing signs of becoming a natural leader like her parents. She talked of wanting to go out into the wider world someday, to spread the message of peace and understanding they had built here. Let her go when the time comes, Zara said when Henrik expressed worry about this. We cannot protect her from everything. We can only give her the tools to face whatever she encounters. I know, but the world can be cruel to those who are different. It can. But it can also be changed, one person at a time, one choice at a time, just like you changed my world with a single copper coin. On their 15th wedding anniversary, the settlement threw them a celebration. Henrik and Zara stood before their community, humbled and grateful, as people shared stories about how the couple had impacted their lives. You showed me that humans could be trusted, one orc woman said. I had lost my family to human soldiers. I thought I would hate them forever. But watching you and Henrik together, seeing the love you share, it helped me heal. You gave me back my faith in my own people, a human man added. I was ashamed of the cruelty I had seen humans inflict on orcs, but you proved that we could be better, that we could choose compassion over hatred. Story after story, testament after testament, each one driving home the impact that one simple act of kindness had created. Henrik listened with growing awe, barely able to comprehend how far the ripples from that day at the trading post had spread. When it was his turn to speak, Henrik took Zara's hand and addressed the gathered crowd. 15 years ago, I was a broken man with nothing left to lose. I gave my last coin to a starving orc woman because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected anything in return. Zara promised I would never go hungry again, and she kept that promise in ways I could never have imagined. She fed my soul, healed my heart, and gave me a reason to believe in the future again. Everything good in my life flows from that moment, from that choice to see past difference to common humanity. If our story has taught you anything, let it be this: kindness matters. Compassion matters. Choosing to help someone in need, even at cost to yourself, matters. You never know what small act of mercy might change the world. Zara squeezed his hand and took over speaking. Henrik gave me food when I was starving, yes, but more than that, he gave me dignity. He did not demand I grovel or debase myself. He simply gave, because he saw my suffering and wanted to ease it. That gift of dignity, of being treated as a person worthy of respect despite my orcish appearance, it saved me in ways that went far beyond physical survival. I had been cast out by my people, rejected and alone. Henrik showed me that I still had value, that I deserved to be loved. Every person here has experienced something similar, rejection by the wider world, but acceptance here. That is the legacy we are building together. A place where everyone is valued for who they are, not what they are. The celebration continued long into the night, and Henrik felt a deep sense of contentment settle over him. This was what they had built, not just a settlement, but a family, a community bound by shared ideals and mutual respect. As more time passed, the settlement began to gain recognition in the wider world. A few progressive human towns and orc clans started sending delegations to see this strange place where old enemies lived in harmony. Some came with skepticism, determined to find flaws in the arrangement. Others came with hope, looking for proof that their own dreams of peace were possible. Henrik and Zara welcomed them all, showing them around, answering questions and simply being themselves. A human and an orc who loved each other, who had built a life together against all odds. Their very existence challenged long-held prejudices and forced people to question assumptions they had never examined before. Not everyone was converted. Some visitors left still convinced that humans and orcs could never truly coexist. But others left changed, carrying seeds of possibility back to their own communities. When Hope turned 16, she came to her parents with a request. "I want to travel," she said, "to see the world beyond the valley, to share our message with others. I know it will be dangerous, but I feel called to do this." Henrik's first instinct was to say no, to keep his daughter safe within the valley's protected boundaries. But he looked at Zara and saw his own fears reflected in her eyes, along with something else: pride and understanding. "You are old enough to make this choice," Zara said slowly, "but you must understand what you are risking. There are those who would harm you simply for existing, who see you as an abomination rather than a person." "I know," Hope said, "but I am living proof that our peoples can come together. If I hide here forever, what good is that proof? Someone has to take the first steps into the wider world, and I want it to be me." Henrik pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "You are so much braver than I ever was. When I was your age, I ran from the world. You want to change it." "Because you and Mama showed me it was possible," Hope said. "Your story gave me hope. Let me carry that hope to others." So they let her go, though it tore at Henrik's heart to watch her leave the valley. She traveled with two companions, one human and one orc, both young people who shared her idealism. They planned to visit settlements and towns, telling their story and demonstrating through their very existence that peace was possible. Months passed with only occasional messages making their way back to the valley. Henrik worried constantly, imagining all the terrible things that might befall his daughter in the hostile world beyond. But Zara reminded him that worry solved nothing, and that Hope was strong and smart and well-trained. Then, nearly a year after Hope had left, she returned. She was not alone. Behind her came a dozen people, humans and orcs and several more of mixed heritage like herself. They were refugees, people fleeing persecution, seeking the same acceptance Hope had grown up with. "They are fleeing a pogrom in the Eastern Territories," Hope explained as Henrik held her tight, relief flooding through him at having her home safe. "Humans killing orcs, orcs retaliating against humans, and anyone caught in between suffering worst of all. I told them about our valley, about what you and Mama built here. They want to be part of it." The settlement welcomed the newcomers, finding space for them, integrating them into the community. And Hope, having proven herself capable in the wider world, began to take on more responsibility within the settlement, helping to train others who wanted to venture out as ambassadors of peace. Henrik watched his daughter growing into her own power and purpose, and felt a bittersweet mix of pride and nostalgia. When had the tiny baby he had held on that August evening become this confident young woman? Where had the years gone? "They pass whether we watch them or not," Zara said when he voiced these thoughts. All we can do is make the most of each moment we have. More time flowed by, and Henrik found gray creeping into his hair, his joints occasionally protesting the mountain cold. He was not old, not yet, but neither was he the young man who had given away his last coin. Life had marked him, changed him, hopefully for the better. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the settlement organized a renewal of vows. Henrik and Zara stood before their community once again, but this time Hope officiated, having trained to perform such ceremonies. 20 years ago, Hope said, her voice strong and clear. My parents chose each other despite everything that said they should not. They built a life together on the foundation of one simple act of kindness, and from that foundation grew everything we have here. Their love has been tested by prejudice, by danger, by separation and fear, but it has endured stronger now than ever. Papa, do you renew your vows to Mama? Henrik looked at Zara, seeing not just the woman she was now, but all the versions of her he had known. The starving exile searching through garbage, the fierce hunter who had stood with him against soldiers, the loving wife and mother, the leader who had helped build a community. All of them loved beyond measure. I do, he said. Every day for the rest of my life I choose you. And Mama, do you renew your vows to Papa? Zara's amber eyes were bright with emotion. I do. You saved my life with a copper coin and kindness. You gave me a home, a family, and a purpose. I choose you, Henrik Nolan, today and always. They kissed as the community celebrated, and Henrik felt time telescoping, past and present and future all contained in this moment. The desperate day at the trading post, the fearful night they had faced soldiers together, the joy of Hope's birth, the pride of watching their daughter grow into a force for change, all of it led to this moment. This celebration of love that had endured and flourished against impossible odds. The years continued their relentless march, bringing more changes. The settlement grew large enough to establish satellite communities in nearby valleys, spreading their message of coexistence. Trade networks expanded, bringing prosperity. More mixed heritage children were born, a whole generation growing up without the prejudices that had poisoned their parents' youth. Henrik eventually stepped back from leadership, content to live more quietly with Zara. They spent their days tending their garden, watching Hope and her generation take over the work of building peace, and simply enjoying each other's company. After so many years together, they had developed the comfortable intimacy of two people who knew each other completely and loved what they knew. Do you ever regret it? Henrik asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. Everything you gave up, everything you endured. It was a variation of a question he had asked many times over the years, and Zara's answer was always the same. Never. Not for a single moment. They sat in peaceful silence, hands intertwined, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their old lives. The sun set, stars emerged, and in the valley below, lights began to appear in windows as families settled in for the night. Human and orc, and everything in between, all living together in harmony. It was not perfect, nothing in life ever was, but it was real and precious and hard-won. And it all began with a single copper coin, freely given, and a promise made in desperate gratitude. You will never go hungry again. Henrik had been fed in ways he never imagined possible, nourished by love and belonging and purpose. And in feeding Zara that day behind the trading post, he had set in motion a chain of events that fed hundreds, thousands even, as their message spread and took root in hearts hungry for an alternative to endless conflict. As he sat there with Zara beside him, surrounded by the community they had helped build, and the legacy they would leave behind. Henrik Nolan felt something he had not felt in the dark days after the war, when he had fled to the mountains seeking only escape from pain. He felt complete. He felt whole. He felt at last like he had truly come home, and when Zara squeezed his hand and smiled at him in the gathering dusk, he knew she felt the same. They had found in each other everything they had been searching for, everything they needed: love, acceptance, purpose, and peace. It had not been an easy road. There had been trials and dangers, moments when everything hung by a thread. But they had faced it all together, and in doing so had proven that love was stronger than hatred, that kindness could change the world, and that one small act of compassion could echo through generations. The night deepened, and eventually they rose and went inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Together, as they had faced everything since that fateful day at the trading post. Together, as they would face whatever time they had left. Together, always together, bound by a promise made in hunger and desperation but kept in love and abundance. You will never go hungry again. And Henrik never was, his soul fed beyond measure by the green-skinned orc woman who had become his wife, his partner, and his greatest blessing. The woman he had saved with his last coin, who had in turn saved him in ways that mattered far more than mere survival. In the end, they had saved each other, two broken people who had found healing in unexpected connection. And from that healing had grown a future neither could have imagined, but both were grateful to be living. As Henrik drifted off to sleep that night with Zara warm beside him, his last thought was one of profound gratitude. For the hunger that had driven him to that trading post, for the compassion that had moved him to share what little he had, and for the chance encounter that had changed everything. He had gambled his last coin on kindness, and the universe had returned it 1,000-fold. It was, he thought as sleep claimed him, the best investment he had ever made.